The late October air carried the smell of wood smoke and something sweeter, maybe cinnamon, maybe memory, as I turned onto the gravel path leading to my Aunt Carol's house. The tires crunched slow and careful, the way you move when you're not sure what you'll find on the other side of a door. I hadn't been here in almost 2 years, not because I didn't want to come, because I'd been told there was no point. My mother had called me the previous spring, with that particular flatness in her voice she reserved for delivering facts she'd already decided weren't up for discussion. "Carol's not doing well," she'd said. "She doesn't really recognize people anymore. It would just upset her to have visitors she can't place." I'd believed her. I don't know why I always believed her. Maybe because the alternative that she was lying was a thought too heavy to carry around on an ordinary Tuesday. The porch light was on even though it was mid-afternoon. A small clay pot of mums sat by the front steps, purple and gold, freshly watered. Someone had been here recently. Someone who cared enough to tend to flowers. I knocked twice before the door opened, and there she was. Aunt Carol, standing upright, fully dressed, eyes sharp and clear, and aimed directly at me like 2 brown searchlights. "You look exactly like your father did at your age," she said. No hello, no surprise. Just that, like we were picking up a conversation we'd only paused for a moment. "Come in. I put coffee on an hour ago, so it's probably terrible by now, but it's hot." I couldn't move for a second. My mother had told me she was gone, not dead, but gone in the way that felt worse sometimes. Faded. Unreachable. I had grieved a version of her that was apparently still standing in her own kitchen, pouring coffee into 2 mugs like it was any other afternoon. "I was told you didn't know who anyone was anymore," I finally said, stepping inside. She turned from the counter and gave me a look that could have cured a headache. "Who told you that?" I didn't answer. She already knew. "My name is Rachel, and I am 31 years old, and until 8 months ago, I thought the most painful thing in my life was being the daughter nobody in my family quite knew what to do with. I was the one who took apart radios to see how they worked and forgot to put them back together. The one who read legal briefs for fun in high school and argued with my father about contract law at the dinner table when I was 15. The one who got into a full scholarship pre-law program and was met with, "Are you sure that's practical? Your brother just opened his restaurant. Maybe you could help him manage the books." My brother's name is Derek. He is 4 years older than me, broadly built, easy laughing, and has my mother's gift for making a room feel warmer just by walking into it. I love him. I'm saying that clearly and first, because what comes later might make it sound like I don't, and that would be wrong. Derek has always been the sun in our family's solar system, not because he demanded it. He didn't have to. My parents simply oriented themselves around him the way plants lean toward light naturally, without thinking, without noticing what was growing in the shade. When Derek was in high school, my father drove 45 minutes each way to every single one of his baseball games. When I placed second in the regional mock trial competition, my mother said, "That's great, honey," and then asked Derek if he wanted seconds of the pot roast. I learned early to find my own applause. I studied hard, not for praise, but because the work itself felt like something solid I could hold onto in a house where I sometimes felt like furniture. I graduated at the top of my class. I got into law school on a partial scholarship and covered the rest myself, taking on extra work, filing paperwork for a small firm on weekends, tutoring undergrads on Tuesday nights. I didn't ask my parents for money, not because I was too proud. Because I knew what the answer would be. 3 years before I sat in Aunt Carol's kitchen, Derek had come to my parents with an idea. He wanted to expand his restaurant into a second location. He needed capital. He needed it fast, and he needed a lot of it. My parents sat with him for an entire weekend, going over numbers, making calls, pulling from accounts I hadn't even known existed. By Monday morning, they had transferred $3.5 million into Derek's business account. I found out, 6 weeks later, by accident. During a conversation my mother didn't realize I could hear from the hallway. I remember standing very still against the wall, my coffee going cold in my hand, listening to her tell my father that Derek deserved a real chance, that he'd always worked so hard, that some people were built for big things, and it was a parent's job to recognize that and help. She never said my name. She didn't have to. Aunt Carol was my father's older sister by 11 years, which made her something of a mystery in our family. She'd had her whole life before my father was even born, a career and a marriage and a chapter of herself that existed entirely outside of us. She'd been a civil rights attorney for nearly 3 decades. She'd argued cases that made it into textbooks. She had a wall in her study lined with framed letters from clients thanking her, and she kept them turned slightly away from the door, like she didn't need anyone else to see them to know they were real. She never had children of her own. But she came to my law school graduation when my parents arrived 40 minutes late because they'd stopped to see Derek's new restaurant space first. She sat in the front row with a sign she'd made herself, my name in block letters, a drawing of a gavel underneath it that looked nothing like a gavel and everything like love. Afterward, she took me to dinner, just the two of us, and for 3 hours, she talked to me like I was someone worth the whole conversation. That was the version of her I kept in my chest like a compass. So when my mother told me she was fading, I believed it partly because I couldn't stand to check. Losing the real thing felt safer if I did it from a distance. Except Aunt Carol wasn't fading. She was right here, pushing a mug toward me across her kitchen table and settling into the chair across from mine, with the careful economy of movement that comes from a body that's been in some pain, but refuses to make a production of it. "Your mother called me last March," she said. "Told me it would be better if we didn't talk for a while. Said you were going through something and too much contact from the family would overwhelm you." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "I should have called anyway. That's my regret to carry." I felt something shift in my chest, slow and tectonic. "She told me you were the one who didn't want visitors," I said. Aunt Carol nodded once, like she was confirming something she'd already suspected. "She's very good at that," she said. "Not cruelly. Just as a fact, the way you'd note that it was raining." We sat with that for a moment. Then she reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her skin was thin now in the way that happens with age, soft over the bones, but her grip was firm. "I'm glad you came," she said. "I need to tell you some things, and I was starting to wonder if I'd run out of time." I learned the rest over the next 2 hours, over terrible coffee that we both drank anyway. Aunt Carol had been diagnosed 18 months ago with a degenerative heart condition. Not imminently fatal, her cardiologist was cautiously optimistic about several more years with the right management, but serious enough that she'd updated her will last spring. She'd called my mother to let the family know, the way you do when you're being responsible about these things. My mother had thanked her, asked a few practical questions, and then apparently spent the following weeks making sure that no one, and specifically, I had any unsupervised contact with Aunt Carol before the paperwork was final. "She assumed I was leaving everything to Derek," Aunt Carol said. "Weren't you?" I asked. I wasn't being bitter. I genuinely wanted to know. She looked at me with something between patience and exasperation. "Rachel, you are a licensed attorney who spent 2 years doing pro bono housing work before you joined a firm. You took on a wrongful termination case last year that you billed 40 hours for and charged nothing because the client was a 22-year-old single mother who couldn't afford your rate." She paused. "Do you think I didn't know that?" I hadn't told her that. I hadn't told anyone in my family that. "How did you—" "I have friends everywhere," she said simply, and took a sip of her terrible coffee. What Aunt Carol had actually done was this. She had left her house, her investment portfolio, her law library, and a financial endowment specifically designated for civil rights and housing justice work to me. Not all of it. She was fair and precise the way she had always been. Derek was named in the will too, and he would receive a meaningful sum. But the primary estate, the professional legacy, the things she had spent her life building, those were mine. She pulled a folder from the drawer beside her chair and set it on the table between us. I recognized the name of the law firm at the top. Serious people, people who didn't make mistakes. My attorney will contact you formally, she said. But I wanted you to hear it from me first, while I'm still here to say it myself. I looked at the folder and couldn't speak for a moment. I'm not done yet, she said. There's a letter. I wrote it a few months ago, and I want to read it to you now, if that's all right. She pulled it from beneath the folder. 3 pages in her handwriting, the same neat slanted script I recognized from birthday cards she'd sent me every year without fail, even the years my parents forgot. She put on her reading glasses and she began. Rachel, if you're hearing this the way I planned, it means I read it to you myself, which means I got the timing right for once in my life. Bear with me. I want to tell you what I saw, because I don't think anyone ever has. I saw you at 8 years old, sitting at the edge of the yard during Derek's birthday party, reading a book about the American judicial system, not because anyone told you to, because you'd found it on my shelf that morning and couldn't put it down. Your mother called you over to sing happy birthday, and you held your page with your finger the whole time. I saw you at 13, after you won the county essay competition on constitutional law, coming downstairs to a kitchen where no one had remembered to put your certificate on the refrigerator. You found a magnet, and you hung it up yourself. Then you made yourself a bowl of cereal and sat alone at the table reading it over while you ate. I was visiting that weekend. I watched from the doorway, and I didn't say anything, and I have been sorry about that ever since. I saw you at 23, graduating from law school, scanning the crowd for your family's faces. I saw your expression when you found them late, distracted, your father still on his phone. I saw you arrange your face into something neutral and proud, and hold it there for 3 hours. You were so careful not to let anyone see it cost you anything. That kind of careful costs everything. You deserved parents who put your name on the refrigerator. You deserved a family that showed up on time. You deserved someone who sat across from you and said clearly, "What you are is not too much. What you are is exactly right." And I am sorry it took me this long to say it out loud. In writing, in a place you can keep. The law library is yours because you'll use it. The endowment is yours because you'll honor it. The house is yours because you need a place that has always been on your side. You were never the difficult one. You were the one they didn't know how to deserve. All my love, always, Aunt Carol. She folded the letter and set it down. I was crying. I hadn't noticed when I started. I became aware of it the way you sometimes become aware of rain, not at the first drop, but at the moment you realize you're already wet. She passed me a box of tissues without making anything of it, the way capable people handle necessary things. We sat together for another hour. We talked about her cases. We talked about mine. She asked me about a tenant rights initiative I'd been trying to get off the ground, and offered 2 specific contacts she said would be useful, the kind of contacts that come from 40 years, of knowing exactly who in this city actually gets things done. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door and held my hand at the threshold the way she had when I was small. "Come back Thursday," she said. "I'll make something better than coffee." I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat, and something loosened in my chest that I hadn't realized was clenched. I didn't call my mother that night. I sat with it. I made dinner. I reread the letter twice. I let it be mine for a little while before anyone else could react to it. She called me the following Friday, which was the same day Aunt Carol's attorney sent the formal documentation. I don't know how she found out so quickly. The attorney's office had only contacted me and Aunt Carol's accountant. But my mother has a network of awareness around anything that involves money or inheritance or the reordering of what she considers the natural order of things, and somehow she knew. "I heard from your Aunt Carol's attorney," she said, before I'd even said hello. Her voice was the controlled kind of calm that means the opposite. "I think there's been some confusion." "There hasn't," I said. A pause. "Rachel, your brother put everything into that second location. The market isn't what anyone expected. He needs support right now, and Carol understands family loyalty." "She does," I agreed. She demonstrated it very well. Don't be smart. Her voice sharpened. This isn't the time. Mom. I set down the dish I was drying. She made her decision. She made it clearly, and she made it herself. I'm not going to apologize for being the person she made it for. She's not well, Rachel. She doesn't fully understand. I sat with her for 3 hours, I said. She understood everything. She was more precise and clear-thinking than anyone I've seen in a courtroom in the last year. If you'd like to challenge the will, you are welcome to find an attorney and try. But I want you to know, before you do that, I will defend it. And I will win. And it will cost more than you have. Silence. Then, I don't know what she told you, but you've always been so ready to think the worst of this family. I thought about the refrigerator. I thought about the birthday party. I thought about 45-minute drives, and standing at the edge of rooms arranging my face into something that didn't ask for anything. I don't think the worst of this family, I said. I think the truth of it. Those are different things. She hung up. Derek called the next morning. I answered because I meant what I said. I love him, and whatever choices he made or didn't make about where to aim his own loyalty, he is my brother, and that is not nothing. Hey, he said. He sounded tired. Mom's pretty upset. I know. She says you're keeping Aunt Carol's stuff away from the family. Aunt Carol gave it to me, I said. That's not the same thing. He was quiet for a moment. Then, did you know she was going to do that? No, I said. I didn't even know she was sick. Mom told me she'd lost her memory. Another silence, longer this time. She didn't lose her memory, Derek said slowly. No. I heard him exhale. It was a complicated exhale, the kind that carries a lot of weight it's been holding for a while. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't know she was telling you that. I know you didn't, I said. And I meant it. We talked for another 20 minutes, not about the will. About his restaurant, which I asked about genuinely, and about a case I was working, which he asked about in the way of someone who doesn't understand the details but is trying to show up anyway. It wasn't everything, but it was something, and something is where you start. I went back to Aunt Carol's on Thursday. She made soup, actually good soup, from a recipe that had apparently been in the family for decades but somehow never made it to our side of the tree. She showed me where she kept the case files she thought I'd find useful. We walked through the law library together, and she told me the story behind each significant volume, the way a person tells stories when they want to make sure the things they love find a good home. I come back every week now, sometimes twice. The endowment officially launched 8 months after that first afternoon on the porch. We named it the Carol Simmons Housing Justice Fund. Over her protests, she wanted it named after a client of hers from 1987, a woman named Dottie, who'd fought a wrongful eviction case that took 3 years and broke entirely in Dottie's favor. We compromised. It's the Dottie Reeves Carol Simmons Fund, and it has already helped 14 families in the first operational year. We have 3 attorneys on retainer, 2 of whom came aboard at reduced rate specifically because Carol made calls. Aunt Carol came to the launch event. She sat in the front row, like I had at my graduation, and she held a sign she'd made herself, the name of the fund in her neat slanted handwriting, with a small drawing of a gavel underneath. It still looked nothing like a gavel. It looked exactly like what it was. My mother did not come. She has not called since our conversation in the kitchen, and I have not called either. That door is not locked from my side, but I am not going to hold it open anymore. Some doors you stop standing in front of, not because you've stopped caring what's on the other side, but because you finally understand that the draft is what's been making you cold this whole time. I think about what Aunt Carol wrote, "You were never the difficult one," and I keep it the way I once kept old trophies, carefully, in a place I can return to. Except I don't keep it in a box under the bed anymore. I keep it where I can see it.